What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. It's Saturday, so time to go over the biggest ADP changes over the last week. Before we start, a quick shout out that the ADP page on the website is back. It's a free tool for anyone to use, and it's incredibly valuable. You can see who's changing the most in ADP recently, but also compare that across sites and find out which players are the best values for the specific site that you are using. So you can find that at my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So, who has been rising the most over the last week? We'll start off with Deshaun Watson. I'm not going to go over this more than like 20-25 seconds, but basically people are thinking that there's been some reports the suspension could be less than a year, and that's going to rise ADP from like, it was around 190 to like 170 now. Any reports you're seeing right now are kind of invalid. It's just different people's thoughts, but until we see an actual decision, don't take any of it more than just like someone's guess, and we really shouldn't be putting any weight behind that. So I guess it can go up to like the 170s, but we're not starting to draft him all of a sudden in the middle rounds or anything. We gotta wait for a decision on this one. Biggest riser though is Rashaad Penny, up 9 spots to the running back 30. This is definitely based on a report that we saw last week that he would get 20 carries per game. He was rising a little bit going into that, so he was on the risers last week. Some of you are pointing out that report. Last week, the rise was not based off the report because the report literally came out like as I was making the video. That obviously can't impact things from like a trailing 7-day ADP or anything, right? But this week it is. This week, him being as high as he's going, up a ton of spots. It's from this report for sure. But I want to read you guys like the full quote because so many people have been asking me about this. Like, oh, the report, he's getting 20 carries per game. Like, now what do you think of him? It's like, I don't think anything differently. The report was bogus. Like, it's not even what it is saying. But basically what happens is a site will pull a quote from somewhere, right? And they'll write up a report about it, and then someone's going to post a headline from that, maybe not even the person who wrote the article or wrote the piece, and they're going to try and get clicks. That is basically just how it works. And so the headline is going to read differently than the actual quote. But what we care about is the quote, and since people are lazy and they don't read the actual quotes, things can get lost. So here's the actual quote. But if Carson can't play, I think a realistic projection for Penny is 20 carries or so a game. He averaged 20.25 in the 4 100-yard games he had to end last season, games that are definitely template for how Seattle wants to play this year. Is that a lot to ask for Penny? As noted, his injury history means any projection comes with an asterisk. Yes, 20 carries a game would be amongst the highest totals in team history. Maybe 15 to 18 is a bit more realistic. Regardless, the bigger picture here is the team hopes Penny can replicate last year's success, and if he does, he's going to be the primary ball carrier, and he'll get the number of carries that comes with that designation. So that quote is not saying he's getting 20 carries per game. It's basically saying in his best 4 games of his career, he averaged 20 carries per game, and those games are game scripts that Seattle likes. But 20 carries is pretty unrealistic. Maybe 15 to 18 is right if he's a primary ball carrier. So if he's the number one, 15 to 18 is probably a better estimate. That's what the quote is saying, yet the headline says 20 carries per game. Rashaad Penny is not getting 20 carries per game, and his ADP should not be going up because Bob over at the Seattle Times decided to extrapolate a 4-game sample, 4 of his best games of his career across the entire season. Don't buy into this hype. His ADP should not be increasing. Next biggest riser, though, should be increasing is Chase Edmonds, which is a little sad. A few weeks ago, for some reason, he was like consecutively on the fallers list. He was just dropping ADP. It made absolutely no sense. Dropped a few weeks in a row, and we were hammering, his depressed ADP in underdog drafts. But now he's risen for 2 straight weeks, up another half round, now being taken as the 32nd running back off boards. I still have him ranked 30th though, so he's still a slight value, though it's becoming less and less of a value for 2 consecutive weeks now. This is a Dolphins offense. It's probably going to be better than people think. He's going to catch more passes than people think. So, I think he's still a great pick. Still a little bit undervalued, but he should be rising as he is. Rachaad White also up half a round. Now the 40th running back off boards. Definitely after the report that Leonard Fournette's up to 260 pounds. There's no way Fournette actually weighs this much. And I really wish this report never came out because it has no impact on my projections, but it makes it more difficult to get White and makes it easier for people who like Fournette to get him in drafts. I'm sure people are going to stop overreacting once, camps actually really get going and people are like, oh, Fournette's not actually 260 pounds. Oh, he actually is still the number one. I think everything's going to go back. So these bumps are probably temporary. And I believe it's 2 ADP spots for Fournette being down. So the bump up, temporary for White, bump down, temporary for Fournette, unless it comes out and White is performing really well in camp. Again, I like White. I think he's a really good talent. So that's a possibility. But this latest report should not be changing things. But it is. Again, I have White as running back 40, so a very neutral value right now. But yeah, the report shouldn't be changing much. In terms of top 100 players, there are actually very few risers this week. Breece Hall's up 3 spots. Christian Kirk is up 2.5 spots. But other than that, there's no major risers. And the only news as far as these two is concerned is Hall signing his contract, but there's no way his ADP is going up 3 spots for as early as he is going, which is like the early 40s. There's no way his ADP is going up multiple spots just because he signed the contract. Everyone knows every rookie's going to sign the contract, right? That wasn't holding people back from drafting him. I'm sure there's a podcast out there, a show out there where these two were talked up, and that's why the ADP increased. We're only 1 week away from people changing ADPs based on actual news in camp. So I'm excited for people's ADPs to not go up off of someone releasing a podcast and that changing ADP. So we're about a week away from that happening. But honestly, that's got to be the only reason these two are going up. There's nothing else that happened to where you should like them more than you did in the past. As for how I value them, I still have each one of them 1 spot for their positions, like 1 running back spot for Hall, 1 wide receiver spot for Christian Kirk above their ADP. So I think both are very slight values, perfectly fine to draft, but not screaming values or anything. It's just 1 spot difference. That is it for risers, though. On the whole, not a lot changing this week. For fallers, Brandon Aiyuk is down 4 spots, now going as the 43rd wide receiver off boards. There was a pretty negative report from I don't know what it was, the 49ers press or something like that, where it's one of those things where beat writers just field mailbag questions, I guess. People submit questions, they kind of answer responses to them. And someone was asking how's Aiyuk doing? Kind of like that. And it was a pretty negative report saying that he's not doing that well, that they thought he would gel more with Lance, given that they worked out together in the offseason. That doesn't seem to be a thing. I guess he dropped a touchdown, turned into an interception. Shanahan's not going to love that. And so not doing great for him, and I'm sure that's why the ADP is going down. I have him on 0 of 24 underdog teams right now, and I project him as wide receiver 47. Again, like I said, that's 4 spots below his current ADP. So I still like him as a player. I like the talent. But, unless he turns things around in August, unless something changes, I have him for the whole offseason has been projected behind where he's actually going. I think people are being a little bit too aggressive with him, liking, maybe this passing attack a little bit more than they should. It's going to be a very run-heavy offense. Lance is still very unproven through the air. And so it's still a no for you, for me. But if he drops, 4 or 5 wide receiver spots based on the news, maybe. But honestly, if camp reports come out, actual training camp's going to start very soon. If those report comes out and they're kind of they're backing up what we're hearing here, well, I'm going to drop him even further. So he's going to need to drop a lot more. Treylon Burks is down 3 more spots to 96th overall. He is wide receiver 46 right now. He was going 70th overall in late May. And while I love his long-term upside, at the time, that was way too early for him to be going. So we pumped the brakes. And in every single week since, basically, he's been a faller. And every week, we're keep waiting, keep waiting. His ADP is going to keep dropping. There'll be an opportunity for us to get him, but we want to wait until we think it's kind of bottomed out. But I believe it was 2 to 3 weeks ago, we kind of predicted this moment. We said, okay, Woods and Burks are going, It was 35, 40 spots away from each other. I thought they'd converge around 100, and I thought at the time I'd take Woods ahead of Burks. There's no reason to draft, Burks 35 spots earlier when you could get Woods later, and I like Woods more. So I thought they'd converge around 100. Right now, they're at 96 for Burks, 102 for Woods. I don't think Burks is going to cross the 100 mark. I think he's kind of going to bounce off of 100 and start going back to where he was before. And my reasoning for that was that it was trending towards, if you just look at the slope of how he's going down for ADP, it was trending towards 100. And it was going to bottom out around 100. around when camps start. And I thought the most likely outcome when camps start is that there's some level of positive news, and that puts his ADP back up. And if his ADP starts to climb, I think he can get back to, that like upper 70s to 80 number. But the only thing we've heard recently are those negative reports from when we had OTAs and when we just have these reports over the offseason that weren't like, they weren't in like true camp, I guess you can say. Like training camp now is true camp. Once camps start opening up now, once you get preseason, this is like real camp. And we have these reports in OTAs, and then we have a big lull where there's no camp going on and there's no news. The reports that we had, a month ago are the last things people heard. And so if the last thing people heard is negative news, that's going to carry out into now. So I think the most likely thing is that he hits 100 or hits real close to 100. He's at 96 now, maybe drops like 98, 99, bounces from there and goes up to the upper 70s into 80 again. So if you're drafting right now, if you're drafting on Underdog, you want to be hammering that because this is probably the lowest his ADP is going to be all summer. Now, I could be totally wrong on this, but we've been right so far on this trend, and I really do think that's the most likely outcome. Is it a lock to happen? Obviously not. He could open up camp and just be terrible, but I think it's likely that he at least has like some positive reports and his ADP will go up because of that. Fournette, down 2 spots for the exact same reason I mentioned before. Again, the report should impact things. I'm actually annoyed that the report came out because I was avoiding him before at running back 11. He's running back 12, I believe, right now, a little bit cheaper. I still don't typically get him, but I do still have him ranked 13th, right? It's not like I have Leonard Fournette ranked 20th or something like that. So I have him as the 13th running back, going 12th off boards. That means you can sometimes get him. Now, there's oftentimes, tight ends or wide receivers that I take ahead, so it's not just that I have, running backs ahead of him, but he's not a terrible pick. And if you're in a draft where everyone thinks that this weight issue is a problem and he starts dipping into like the late 3rd round, we'll attack that. Now it's a really good value, even if I'm not on him at like a late 2nd round ADP. So make sure you're paying attention to that. And honestly, that's it for ADP changes. This was like the slowest news week that we've had of the entire offseason as things really start to ramp up. Anything that happened this week was super minor changes, nothing you really need to know. I think next week is going to be like the tipping point of here comes the news. Everything's going to start to get rolling. People are going to start doing drafts next week. And so ADPs are really going to change as the volume increases, as reports come out, as we approach the preseason. Things are going to fluctuate a lot. So remember, keep track of all of that on the ADP page on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Free to use. It's an insanely valuable tool and one that you should kind of make part of your process. Go to that page, see who's moving up and down. Go to your site if you're using Yahoo, NFL, Sleeper, ESPN, all those different sites. Click like best picks and worst picks, and you're going to see, oh, maybe I like a player, but if he's the worst pick, across all of the platforms on yours, maybe it's not a good idea to get them. So I'll be back tomorrow to go over some undervalued players. Monday for another episode of Mock Draft Monday. Tuesday night, live, 8 p.m. Eastern, do some drafts on YouTube. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.